My name's Brandon Smith. Today we're going to be talking about protecting your parts investment and how to avoid aging inventory and increase profits. I spent 25 years working in fixed operations in dealerships. I worked as a parts counter person, a parts manager, service advisor, service manager, and a parts and service director before coming to work with Cox Automotive and Dealer Track DMS about 3.5 years ago. Let's talk about parts inventory. Now, usually when I start talking about parts inventory, I see a lot of people's eyes glaze over because it's not one of the most glamorous things to talk about. But specifically, we want to talk about the parts department and parts inventory, and it's definitely a necessity for the department. The parts department provides a vital support role for the service department, and they also generate about a 1-to-1 sales dollar ratio against the service department. So they generate some good revenue as well. The parts departments require a very large investment in capital to purchase the amount of parts inventory needed to provide a level of service that customers expect these days. So we need to make sure that we're protecting that investment and keep the percentage of aging inventory to a minimum. Now, I'm sure that we have dealers, general managers, parts and service directors, maybe even a service manager or two on the meeting today. And a lot of you understand how expensive aging inventory can become, but I want to give some examples for those that don't. And a good example in the automotive industry that you might be able to relate to is the way we control or manage our used car inventory. The value of a used car goes down pretty much every month in most markets, and it can reduce the profit, and you can even lose money when you sell or wholesale a vehicle if you're not turning them in a timely manner. So I'm not sure that anyone's really come up with a way to eliminate this expense, but we know we can reduce it dramatically, like I mentioned, by turning them within 30 to 45 days. Today, we're going to talk about similar strategies that can help reduce the amount of aging inventory in your parts department. Okay, so what is idle inventory? There's probably some different definitions out there, but for the purposes that I'm going to be using today, the definition that I use is when a part gets to be about between 9 months and 12 months without a sale and longer, that's considered idle inventory because it's not very likely that those parts will sell in the future. In my experience, a lot of stores that I work with have quite a bit of idle inventory, more than industry standard, I would say. The NADA says that you should be about 10% or less. I see some stores that are as low as 5%, just a few, not too many, but the average is probably between 10 and I see even as high as 65% in most parts departments. And so why is idle inventory or aging inventory a bad thing? So idle inventory or idle capital is really considered an unrealized loss. And because these parts aren't going away. And just to give you an example, I had a dealer that comes to mind that they didn't do a really good job of getting rid of their aging inventory, and they had been open for a lot of years. I want to say it was probably 30, 40 years, something like that. And they had accumulated about $400,000 worth of idle inventory. And that was a lot. And it was probably 60% of their inventory, 60, 70% of their inventory. And they ended up selling the store. Well, when they sold the store, the company that came in and bought it, they don't buy any inventory that was over 9 months without a sale, or that's part of their contract is that they weren't going to buy part of the inventory that was older than 9 months. And so they ended up having to write all that off. So I guess my point is, at some point in the cycle, you're going to have to absorb this expense in one way or another. Because statistically, parts that sell or that have not had a sale in 9 months or more, only about 3% of those parts will ever sell. And when they reach 12 months without a sale, only about 0.6% of those will ever sell. Not 6%, 0.6 will ever sell. That's a pretty low number. So just to give you an example, if you had $20,000 worth of idle inventory, you would probably only recoup about $120 of that 20,000. So 120 would only ever sell. Today, we're going to discuss reports that you can use to identify how much idle inventory or aged inventory you've accumulated in your parts department. We're going to identify inventory, where that inventory is coming from, and who likely created that or generated that idle inventory. We're going to talk about best practices that will reduce the amount of idle inventory you're generating and what you should do with your already aged inventory. And finally, we want to discuss ways to reduce the losses before writing them off of the books. So the first thing we need to figure out is how much inventory do you have so that we can compare that to the idle. And so the best way we can do that in the DMS is we're going to use inventory analysis. So if you go into the DMS, you go into the main parts screen or the main menu with all of the parts tiles. We're going to click on transaction analysis. And once we get into the analysis selection, we'll go to inventory analysis. And you can just hit OK, and that'll move you forward. Once we get to inventory analysis, there is an option, and I'm going to back up just a hair here, guys. I got ahead of myself. There's an option here on the top where you can go into the stocking groups and the different manufacturers. Some dealers may have multiple manufacturers, and some may have just other make or other parts that aren't your manufacturer parts in the system. And you can go into this link to select those so that you can identify just the parts that you're looking for in the system. Once we get to inventory analysis, the number that we're really concerned about here is we want to go into total inventory, or the total of inventory. So in this example, they have $870,350 in total inventory. So once we have that number, we can just exit out of here, and we're going to go into our inventory aging tool, because now we want to determine how much of that inventory is actually idle inventory. Again, we're in the parts tab. We're going to go to transaction analysis. And then we can go into the analysis section. And just below inventory analysis, there's inventory aging tool. And this is a new report or new reporting tool that's actually very useful for a lot of other things as well, but it's very useful for inventory aging. We'll select that. And then you can just select OK. And this takes you into the report. This report, you don't need to set up anything. It's just going to load automatically. But for the purposes that we're looking for here, we want to go into show filters. And that will create a little drop down on the side. And what we're specifically looking for is last sale dates. So we're going to open up the last sale date, and we want to select it by months. And we also want to put in the from field 12 for 12 months, and in the to field, we're going to leave that blank. Now, in DealerTrack DMS, if you have a part that you just got recently, and you have never had any sales in it, it wouldn't show. It would fall into the 12 months or more without a sale because it's never had a sale. So we also want to filter out items that may have been received more recently than 12 months. And so you can see that I've selected the last receipt date as well. And again, we're going to select by months, and we're going to do from 12 months, and we'll leave the to filled blank, and then we just hit update. At that point, it's going to generate the report. We can go into list options. And when we could go to list options, we're going to download the report. And you'll see that it just shows up in an Excel file there at the bottom of your screen. When that Excel file opens up, you're obviously going to have an Excel file that lists all the parts that we filtered in the previous report. And what we're looking for is in the P column, that's actually the extended cost column of all of the parts that we selected. So anything that was 12 months without a sale or 12 months received, it will be, we've got the extended cost in the P column. So I just created a formula that adds up the column, and you can see that we've got that there. And I also inserted the inventory value, and then just divided it to give us a percentage of total inventory. So it's a big number in this store. So once you know what your how much idle inventory you have, well, what now? So we know what we've got. Where do we go from here? So we need to identify where all of this is coming from. And so what I found, one of the best ways to do that is we need to track it, because some of the reasons that we got a lot of the parts that are there already may not be the same reasons that we're accumulating inventory today. And so we want to try to get ahead of this thing. So we need to track it and find out where they're coming from. I recommend that you create some type of a worksheet. I just kind of made this up in spreadsheet and printed it out for my guys to use when I was a parts manager. I put the part number, the quantity, the counterman. I needed to know the tech. You may also want to know the advisor. That's up to you. But the big thing is we need to know the reasons why these parts weren't sold. I would also recommend that you get a bin, allocate a bin, or maybe have a big tote that you put a lot of these parts in, because any parts that weren't ordered for stock, we need to know what happened here, why they didn't get sold, and then we're going to put them in a bin, and the returns and new bins will be created from this bin. I would recommend assigning a person in the department to create and process returns, and then create new bins in the system for the remaining parts that can't be returned. Obviously, we want to use up all of our return money first on these parts because we didn't order them, or we didn't order them for stock. We want these to go away. And then the manager can use this information to create kind of a master tally sheet. Every month. I would recommend they pull it monthly and tally them all out, and take that information, use it to develop or modify processes to reduce the causes or the reasons parts are not being sold. So what we're going to find as we go through this sheet is most of the time, a big percentage of these parts are special order parts. And so preventing parts from becoming aging inventory is the best way to reduce or to reduce the amount of accumulation in idle inventory. And like I mentioned, the majority of them are going to be special order parts. And the big reason for that is the reason we had to order these parts is because we don't stock them, and we don't stock them because they don't have enough demand or enough sales history to justify stocking them. So these parts are far less likely to sell in the future. Now, not only will these parts create lost revenue to the parts department if we don't sell them, and could result in some additional expenses to return or scrap the parts later, service isn't going to get the opportunity to install these parts in a lot of cases too. So they're going to miss out on the labor to install them. We want to increase our odds of installing these parts more often, and I'm going to give you some best practice ideas on what we can do to do that. And so the first one is I would highly recommend that if you have a customer pay part, you require a customer to put down 100% deposit. Some people will call it prepay for the part, but in dealer tracking, you're going to put down 100% deposit for the special order when you order it. I work with a lot of stores that when we first start talking about this concept, they just don't feel comfortable asking their customers to order parts. And the response I would have to that is, the largest retailer in the world does it every day. They require you to prepay for your part when you order it. In a lot of cases, they can get it to you the next day if you sign up for their Prime program. So, and I think if they can get away with it, customers are definitely accustomed to it, and it's not an unreasonable thing to ask of your customers. It's also going to let you know their level of commitment to ordering these parts. If they're just thinking they might want it and that you'll order it without getting payment, they might do that just in case they decide they want it. So we want to eliminate that from happening. There's a setting in the DMS to prompt all special order parts to collect 100% deposit, whether it's for counter tickets or repair orders. And I would recommend that you have that set for 100% on both. Now, the majority of it is going to come from counter tickets, because if a vehicle's in the shop, most of the time the customer doesn't come and pick it up until the repair's been completed. And so you're never going to collect the money if the part hasn't arrived yet, right? But there might be some situations where you have a trim part that you're ordering for a customer. And I would definitely recommend that if that customer is going to come and pick that up, because it might be a couple of days before it gets in, have them pay for it, because customers tend to come back for items that they've already paid for. Okay. Another thing that you can do to help try to get customers to leave vehicles there to get it repaired instead of picking it up is offer a rental to the customer. Whether you work through Enterprise or Hertz or something like that, or if your manufacturer offers some kind of a program where you can use new vehicles or something like that. If it's a warranty repair, a lot of manufacturers will actually participate in the expense of a rental. And so, I would just try to maximize that opportunity to get the customer to leave the vehicle there. It's also going to help with your fix it right the first time stats. And I see a lot of people offer kind of low cost rentals to their customers too, where it's another profit center to the service department. So there's definitely some opportunities there. And again, the goal is let's keep the vehicle until we can get it repaired completely before we put the customer back in it, and we're more likely to get these parts installed. I see people offer expedited shipping. Again, manufacturers will a lot of times pay for the freight on warranty parts, or you may choose to absorb the freight charges to get the customer to leave the vehicle there. I know that a lot of manufacturers these days, the logistics of the parts distribution network is so good that a lot of their faster moving parts will arrive the very next day. So really, it's a matter of just getting them to leave it one day so that you can complete the repairs, so that we make sure that we get those parts installed instead of potentially not having the customers come back. Follow-up is another big concern that I see in a lot of dealerships. When the part arrives, who's notifying the customer and scheduling an appointment to get them back into the store? Or even just letting them know the parts have arrived so they can pick them up. And a lot of times on the parts side of it, if they purchased on a counter ticket, you'll just have parts counter people that are involved in that. And if it's in the service department, most stores will have advisors contacting the customer, just merely because they have the relationship with the customer to begin with. Again, the DMS offers a really good reporting tool for advisors to track their special orders and counter people. You can print special orders daily as parts arrive. You can decide if you want to just see all the parts that have been received. You can decide if you want to see all parts that are on order. A lot of advisors like to see everything that's on order just to verify it's been ordered, and they can see the ones that have been received as well. And the system will actually allow parts counter people and advisors to make notes in the system. You can mark if they've been notified or not. You can put a little note in there saying, hey, there was an appointment scheduled on this date and who they spoke with. Things like that are pretty valuable to track in the system. And then the system notes when you print those reports if they've been notified or not. A lot of people do a good job notifying people. What they don't do, and maybe I shouldn't say notifying them, but getting the information to the advisor, what they don't do is they don't hold their advisors or their counter people, or even if they're having a business development center agent call and notify customers, they don't hold them accountable to make sure that we're getting appointments scheduled for all of the parts. Because this is just money sitting on the shelf that we need to do something with. And so I would recommend that you track how many days it takes from when a part arrives, when it gets received, to when an appointment is scheduled. And so if you have parts that have been received for over 7 days or 10 days or something like that, there needs to be some conversations with those employees that are responsible to do that. Typically, we find that customers will return sooner than later to pick up parts. what I mean by that is when it's still fresh on their mind, they're more likely to come back and get it done versus if they've, if we couldn't get a hold of them or didn't get a hold of them for a month, they're less likely to be in a big hurry to get back into the store to get those things installed. Another reason we see as you're tracking these items in the parts department is sometimes the parts department will just order the wrong part, and there's a lot of reasons for that. It's not, it's not like they did it on purpose, we hope, but if they did, we need to figure out what happened. And again, if we're using that tracking sheet, they're going to have a reason there, and we need everybody who's going through and entering the reasons on the tracking sheet to ask those questions. I mean, we're not saying we want them to interrogate anybody if something happened, but we need to know why. And everybody should know, hey, you're going to get asked if you have to return a part back. And I mean internally that, hey, we need to know where was the breakdown? Why did we end up with this? So again, where was the breakdown? Was it preventable? Did the counter person follow your process? Do you have a written process for your counter people to follow? I'm going to go down a little bit of a rabbit hole here about process, because early in my career, I was tasked with writing a written process for my counter people in my department, and I was shocked at how differently each one of the counter people in the department did things. And so we sat down, we got a lot of information on how we ought to do things and the why and different things behind it. And we wrote it out and decided on one way we're going to do it. And then I'll admit it took a little time and a little prodding to get everybody on the same page to follow the process. But I will tell you, once we were up and running and we modified it here and there to make it valuable so that we could head off problems down the road, head off idle inventory issues that could take place. I really started to put away my fire hose, so to speak, where the department just ran more smoothly. And it's a living document, so as things change, as different situations come up, you can change it. But the manager should be making that change and then filtering that down to the rest of the staff and keep everybody on the same page. Another thing that I think is a great opportunity within the system is we have a parts requisition function in the system, and it just allows the parts counter person to get the VIN number. The tech's going to put what they're looking for on the sheet. You can either choose to print it, or you can do it electronically, where a little button will kind of highlight on the screen for the counter people, and they know that there's a requisition sitting in there that they need to take care of. But it's really a great tool so that techs aren't walking in and out of the parts department, and it keeps them working in their bays, and you get the parts counter person gets the information they need to order the right part. Most parts catalogs these days want you to search by VIN number, and the catalogs aren't wrong very often. It's actually pretty dang accurate. The VIN number, it'll VIN decode the number, and they're able to get model information, trim information, a lot of different information that we don't want people guessing on, or might take more time to get trim codes and different things off the vehicle. We can get that right off the VIN, which comes on the parts requisition. So it's a great tool. Another common reason you may run into is the technician may have requested parts that weren't needed for the repair. And you might ask, well, how does that happen? Well, we're going to use the tracking sheet to compare to see if other technicians are compare to other technicians to see if it's a certain technician or a couple of different technicians that seem to have this problem more than others. Excuse me, but why are they doing it? Does your process that you have for your technicians support the goal of not ordering parts that aren't necessary? I see a lot of stores where they put a process in place where technicians are really only authorized to order warranty parts, and the advisor has to call back to parts to order customer pay parts because they're going to be prepaid or 100% deposit on those. So that helps reduce some of the responsibility that way. But from the technician side, we occasionally will see them ordering test parts. And I know that there's some situations where it's hard to get around this. Technicians may not know how to test the failed component, or occasionally order a part to verify that it fixed the issue. Now, I don't want to say you can't ever do this, because there are going to be some situations where your tech hotline may even say, hey, you need to use a known good part. But we always tried to look for maybe a used one we could pull it off of if it was, and unless it was just a very inexpensive part where there wasn't a lot of risk. But risk is the key. If we're ordering parts that we may not install, we could get stuck with some expense to get rid of them. Are your technicians doing a thorough diagnosis? Again, they might be shortcutting the diac. There are a lot of them are on flat rate, and they try to move through and work it as quickly as they can, and sometimes that leads to some mistakes. And so you might need to discuss that with them. Or do they need additional training on those types of diagnoses to do those repairs more efficiently, or do those diagnoses more efficiently? I'm going to talk about the next one a lot. It comes down to accountability again. Best practice would be if a part was ordered and not installed, and I personally actually use this as a parts and service director at the store I was at, and some of you might be shocked to hear this, but if the tech was required to take any parts that they ordered and didn't install to the service manager and explain what happened. Service could potentially end up writing off the part if we didn't have any return money available. And I don't want to make it sound like that's just a black and white rule, because you can interpret that how you want and what'll work best within your store. But parts managers and service managers usually work pretty closely together. And obviously, if there's a lot of return money, they may just go ahead and return it, and that there's really no expense to the service department or to any department really. But if it's an ongoing problem, and service starts writing off parts that they're ordering that aren't getting installed, that's the best way to raise the awareness. So instead of kind of brushing it under the rug in the parts department, allocate the expense to who's generating the problem or creating the problem. Advisors will sometimes order parts that aren't needed for the repairs as well. We want to evaluate that. Again, we can use the tracking data in the parts department to kind of see where it's coming from, who the culprits are. That's one of the reasons why I mentioned you may want to have an advisor number or name on your worksheet that you create for the parts department. Is it one or several of them that stick out from the rest, and why? What's happening there? One of the most common things I found in my experience was I would have certain advisors that felt like they could diagnose the vehicle on the drive. It was usually a situation where it was an experienced advisor and they just seemed to know what they thought, or at least they thought they knew what the problem was. And they'd just call back to the parts department and have them order the part for the customer. And so my question would be do you allow this in your shop? Because again, there's some risk involved. If they end up ordering the wrong part, could cost us some money to get out of that part. So best practice would be get it to the technician as often as possible. And when I say that, I know that there's reasons why you may not be able to do that. You may have a recall or something that you have to get a VIN or something to order it. There's a few reasons why you might need to allow them to order those parts on the drive, but there should be very few, and the service manager should be dictating when we allow that and when we don't. But if we can get it back to the technician, there's some big advantages to that. They have the training and the expertise. And I like to use kind of a doctor analogy, excuse me, that if I was going to go into the doctor, I really don't want the receptionist trying to tell me what my problems are. I want the doctor to tell me what the problem is or what my diagnosis is. So we want to make sure that we get it to the tech. You could also miss out on some potential upsell opportunities. The tech can do a thorough multi-point when they get it back there and possibly upsell some items and get those parts ordered as well as the parts for the needed repairs. That way, when the customer comes back, everything's there ready to go. And so it could increase your profitability, hours per RO, things like that. And again, accountability falls in play here. We've got to make sure that we're holding the advisors accountable. If they do stuff like that, there needs to be some conversations about it. Best practice would be, I would make a rule that, hey, we're not allowing advisors to order parts without vehicle being diagnosed by a technician. Parts that were once good moving parts can eventually become stagnant as well. And you may, a good example is, I have a part today with the current model year that we're selling the heck out of these, the 4 or 5 a month pretty consistently. So I have 1 or 2 on the shelf. Well, over time that they're going to come out with a new model, and that part's going to slow down. And if I if I had a few of those in stock, they could just eventually slow down and kind of phase out, and I could get stuck with them. Now, there's a few ways to manage this. You can take a look at the history of each of the parts that are on your list as aged inventory, and see what happened during the life cycle of the part. It could be a phase-in problem, and a lot of manufacturers have auto replenishment programs these days, where the manufacturer's just sending you parts, and you may not be using the DMS to phase parts in and things like that. But if you are, the phase in can be a big part of that, and so you want to take a look at your phase-in criteria. The phase-in controls the breadth of parts in inventory, and breadth is the number of different parts that you have on the shelf. Different part numbers that are on the shelf. Is your phase-in too aggressive? Is it allowing parts to phase in too quickly or without enough demand to justify adding them to stock? So you may want to evaluate that. Most stores will require 3 hits within a 9 to 12 month time period to phase parts in. And phase in is basically going to make it a stocking status part. Okay. It could be a day's supply issue. Days supply controls the depth of parts in your inventory. So once a part has phased in, how many should I put on the shelf? So the depth is the quantity of each part number you have on the shelf. An example would be, if I have a part that sells, I sell 5 of them a month pretty consistently, so a 30-day supply would be 5, right? Well, I may not want to stock 5, or I may not want to have a 30-day supply on parts like that because they're fairly fast moving. My facing PDC or depot for my manufacturer is likely to have those parts on hand. And in most cases, I'm going to be able to reorder them and have them the very next day. So I really don't need to risk stocking 5 of them when I could probably stock 1 or maybe 2 just to be safe, and still be able to supply the demand that I need for to supply to my customers and have it when I need it. I see a lot of managers use the minimum quantity on hand feature in the system, which that basically forces the system to keep a minimum quantity on hand. And it kind of overrides the phase out criteria because it's always going to keep however many you have there. And a lot of times you're going to use this because you might have like a recall part that hasn't met your phase in criteria, or for whatever reason, you're trying to get a bunch of these done and you need to have more on hand to fulfill the amount of appointments that are coming in every day to make sure you can stay ahead of it. So I'm not saying it's the wrong thing to use, but it needs to be managed. So I would recommend, if you're using the minimum quantity on hand feature, or there's a max feature as well, I would make sure that you're reviewing that list monthly or at least quarterly, because like I mentioned, there's no chance for the system to phase out those parts. They're just going to keep them forever. And if we use that leads me to the phase out criteria. Phase out could be another problem too. I see a lot of stores that set up their phase out criteria at 12 months without a sale. Well, like I mentioned before, when a part's been sitting on the shelf for 12 months without a sale, it's very unlikely you're ever going to sell it. So I would recommend that you change your phase out criteria, if it's not already there, to 6 months without a sale. And that's going to allow you a little bit more time to try to sell out of that part before you're stuck with it and it's kind of dead inventory. With the exception of maybe a few seasonal items, which you're just going to have to manually make decisions on those. Okay. Another way to reduce your already aged inventory or prevent already aged inventory is to make sure you're maximizing your manufacturer's return policies. Most manufacturers offer some sort of 60 to 90-day return policy for special order parts. Manufacturers that have auto replenishment type programs like RIM or something like that, they typically have protected parts. And that's another thing that you've got to make sure that you're maximizing those return policies, because we don't want to get stuck with them. And basically a protected part means they think you ought to have it on the shelf. If you don't end up selling it within, I believe GM has gone to 18 months. Once you have it for 18 months without a sale, they'll take it back. And there's little expense or no expense to get back out of that part, so it's protected. But special order parts will fall into kind of a 60-day, 90-day return, and you need to make sure you know what you're allowed to return, how much money you have to return, and you're using every penny of it before you're putting any of those parts back on the shelf. At this point, the rest of the things that we're going to talk about are really about reducing loss, because we've got the part now, we're kind of stuck with it. We got to figure out how we're going to get out of it with minimal expense to the department, because you've tried to return it, you tried to sell it, we need to get out of it now. So one of the things that I found to be a great tool is there's some locator tools out there, or softwares, systems that you can use. One of them is OE Connection. It's a tool that a lot of parts departments are using to locate parts from other dealers, or even some manufacturers do a good job of putting their depot's inventory on it as well, so you can see where parts are going to come from. But most of them use a tool that allows you to discount parts when they hit a certain age on your shelf. And so, like I mentioned before, at 9 and 12 months, it's unlikely we're going to sell these things. And so I would recommend at a certain point, like 6 months, you start where you might normally sell a part to another dealer at maybe 20 over cost plus 20 or something like that. You may want to, at 6 months, you may just say, hey, I'll sell it at dead cost just to try to get out of it, so you don't really have any loss on it. And then at 9 months, I would recommend maybe 20% off a cost. This might attract some dealers that are a little bit further away from you, and that would pay for the freight for them to take the part off your hands. Or another dealer might see that as an opportunity to make a little bit of gross and get out of it, because like I mentioned, at 9 months, like 3% of those parts are going to sell off your shelf. And then at 12 months, most people will drop it down to about 50 cents on the dollar. So you're lucky to get 50 cents for every dollar you paid for that part. These systems will allow that to just kind of automatically happen behind the scenes to help you reduce your losses on those parts. A lot of those locator systems will even offer some kind of brokering or brokerage tools within them, or there's other brokerage companies out there that will broker with high volume dealers. Like you may have a dealer that does a lot of wholesale, where they can send them a list of your aged inventory, and they'll go through and kind of cherry pick the parts that are moving for them, and it's a big advantage for them because they're going to buy them at 50 cents on the dollar. That's the going rate, and you're going to pay the freight to send it to them, and the brokerage company's probably going to get some kind of a fee for handling the whole thing. Last time I checked, it was 7% of the sale you had to pay to the brokerage company. That may have changed, and they may be different between other companies, but that's what I've seen out there. Be careful with this, because if you have heavy parts, remember you're going to pay the freight on it. It may not even make sense to ship it. A good example is like a set of running boards. It may not make sense to ship those. You may want to just write it off. It might be more of a loss. So be sensitive to that, but it is a good tool to reduce your losses there. And then a lot of stores will come up with, they'll set up some kind of write down money, like and that's a term that the used car department uses, or maybe even the new car department, to write down parts. It's really just scrap money, because I really don't believe in writing down your parts, because if the cost of it was a little less, it doesn't make it any more likely to sell to the retail world anyway. So at some point, you need to kind of just cut your losses and write these parts off. So a lot of people will set up money. They'll set up an inventory adjustment account, and they'll either accrue money, where you can maybe set a dollar amount or a percentage of your gross that kind of funnels into this, and then you use that account to write off parts instead of making it just an expense all the time. Some dealers will use their stock order discount money that they get to funnel into this account, and then it's not a whole, 100% hit when you're writing them off every month. Or some dealers will just write it off and take the hit every month as parts get to, say, 18 months without a sale. You just write it off. You use this account to when you're discounting parts, to sell them at 50 off or something like that too. And so it just gives a kind of a slush fund, so to speak, so that you can move these parts. And then obviously, as a last resort, you get to the point where you've tried to prevent them from ordering it. Obviously, you put processes in place. You tried to sell it off through a brokerage or discounting it or something. You couldn't make it go away. The last resort is we need to scrap these parts. So obviously, we want to make sure we've exhausted all those resources before we go to this extent. Some stores will write down the parts to a penny. I've seen them do that as well, and then keep them on the shelf. I don't recommend you do this, because shelf space anymore in this day and age is at a premium, and you're really just going to be reaching over these old parts that are dead, so to speak, to get to the parts that you're moving. And so I would just recommend that you throw them in the garbage and move on. Like I mentioned before, only 0.6% of parts that you've had on the shelf for over 12 months will ever sell. So write them off. Write off and make an inventory, or write them off and make an adjustment to your inventory adjust account. And some dealers will also create a sub account for your inventory adjustment account, kind of like you might see in the service department when they do shop supplies, and they'll have an account for the credits they're putting in, and then they have an account for the debits, just so they can keep track of them separately to see how much. So it doesn't just look like, hey, we didn't write off anything when there was really, we put $5,000 in that account and then we wrote off $5,000. We want to be able to keep track of what it really was. And then they funnel them together to go to a single account where the posts on the financial statement. All right, in summary, aging inventory is part of running a parts department. And it costs you money to get out from under these parts. So the best thing you can do is to reduce the risk by only ordering parts that are going to sell, right? That's the key. Now, whenever possible. And I think that if you tighten up your processes and do some different things, you'll find there are ways that you can reduce that from happening. Because even the best run parts departments are going to generate some aging inventory. Okay, so the big thing is we want to identify, we want to stop the bleeding, identify where these parts are coming from. We need to implement processes that are going to discourage ordering parts that are more likely to become idle inventory, like special orders. We know that the majority of special orders are what is going to end up as idle inventory. So make people pay for them up front, take a deposit, make sure people are following up to get those parts picked up or installed in a timely manner. we want to maximize all of our manufacturers' return allowances. This is obviously the least expensive way out of the equation here. So if they give you money to return stuff with really no or next to no expense to the department, that's going to be one of the best ways to get out from under these parts. And we need to minimize our losses. Use resources like OE Connection and cash discovery programs to minimize the overall loss that you get to get out from under these parts. We can set up an inventory adjustment account because in the end, when all other avenues have been exhausted, you need to scrap the part. Again, like I mentioned, I believe 18 months is the right number. You do what works for you, but really at 12 months, it's not going anywhere. And that just gives you another few months to take one last effort to try to do something with it and then move on. All right, well, this is the conclusion of protecting your parts investment. I want to thank everyone for joining me today. I hope there were some good takeaways from the meeting today. And if you have any questions, please reach out to your performance manager. If you don't have one, you're welcome to email me directly. My email is on the screen, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.